When I first heard the news about a new Pinocchio Souls-like game coming out, I was actually kind of excited, though I know a lot of people in the Souls community were kind of skeptical of the game. I mean, seeing as it's literally Pinocchio Dark Souls. But, it was also adding on to the genre of games that try to be just like Dark Souls. And a lot of the games that try to do that don't really end up succeeding most of the time, and the ones that do usually tend to just take inspiration from Dark Souls and be something that can be completely separable from the Souls genre, like Hollow Knight or Dead Cells. So with this in mind, I knew that I probably wanted to wait for the game to come out and see reviews for it, and after seeing raving reviews and some of my favorite YouTubers praising the game, I knew I had to pick it up, and I'm really glad that I did. This is how I went from hating to loving Lies of P. But really quickly, before I get into why I disliked Lies of P at the beginning, first I want to talk about some of the things that captivated me even in my early hours of the game when I was still somewhat harsh on it. The atmosphere in Lies of P is one of the most exciting atmospheres I've delved into in a game in a long time. Upon loading up Lies of P, you'll find that aside from the game having beautiful graphics, it also carries some of the most wonderful architecture I've seen in gaming. I found myself thoroughly enjoying my escapade through the city of Krat, being taken to several different locations and environments throughout the city. It just never got old to me. Maybe this is because I'm biased towards city environments, but I think that the art team for this game did an incredible job with every location, being able to keep each place in Krat distinct from one another while still feeling as though they're all part of the same world. Another thing that helps tie this all together is the world's interconnectivity. Despite the game following a somewhat linear path, it still does connect all throughout each level. There's no cut to black and loading screen between areas, disregarding the final level of the game where that does happen, but for the most part it's all interconnected, and you could walk through the whole game from beginning to end. I know a lot of people complain about these kinds of linear designs in the Souls games, but personally, I really like them. I tend to notice the game is better tuned in difficulty when the developers choose a more linear path. It just helps the game have a bigger sense of balance when the developers are choosing which path you go down. Kind of like Dark Souls 3 compared to Dark Souls 1. In Dark Souls 1, you can go anywhere. You could be going the complete wrong direction from the moment you start up the game and get past the tutorial. But in Dark Souls 3, you only really have one or two ways to go, and they loop back together at the end. This usually just helps the game feel more handcrafted and more of an enjoyable experience because the developers intended for you to play it a certain way. So really, to me, the linearity of Lies of P is actually a plus in my book, though I know everyone is going to have a different opinion on that, and everyone has their own preferences. And on the topic of the world of Lies of P, it's time to talk about the hub, Hotel Krat. This is your Majula, your Firelink Shrine, your other thing that they have in Sekiro. I don't really remember what the hub is called in that game. But regardless, this is where you can interact with NPCs, which, by the way, I love the NPCs in this game, and you can level up, invest points into your skill tree, buy and sell items, and the normal hub stuff that you find in games. Overall, it's a really solid area. It's really fun to see the progression through your game and how it affects your hub with unlocking new areas, and of course the classic shortcuts back to where you just were. But what really captivated me when I first arrived at the hotel is the music. Inside of Hotel Krat is a gramophone, and this gramophone plays records. You can find records throughout the course of the game, and in New Game Plus I think there's around maybe a little less than 20, but you can use them and pick the music that plays throughout the hub. This was really special to me because there's a song that plays throughout one of the later levels of the game that was also in the trailer, and it's some lady singing in French, but it is an absolutely beautiful song, and I was ecstatic when I got my hands on the disc that played it. And they also do play a role in the game itself. When you listen to each song, you gain humanity, which is a factor that ties into what ending you'll get and your character interactions and so on. Another thing that makes this music so special is that throughout the game, there is no natural soundtrack unless you're in a boss fight. But as you walk through the levels, there's nothing to guide you along. The only time you'll really hear anything is in specific areas where music is supposed to be coming from the world around you. Like there's this one part of the game where you're walking through these streets, and in the buildings around you, you can hear people, and you can hear speakers playing music, and it's supposed to show that the area was a lived-in place before that you were there, and it just really adds to the game. Another thing that really attaches me to the music in the game is that it's all, or almost all of it, is attached to an NPC and their quest. There's this character in the game who has two outcomes for their story, and depending on which path you take doing their quest, you will get one of two discs, each with different emotions, and it's all just so great. I really recommend doing the side quests in this game. And speaking of characters and NPCs, it's time to talk about the story. Lies of P has a more traditional way of storytelling than most games in the Souls-like genre. Instead of being very hidden from the player, here the story is directly given to you, which for me is a breath of fresh air. Having your story be hidden from the player isn't necessarily bad, but just because Dark Souls does it doesn't mean that every game in the Souls-like genre needs to do the same thing. Especially when the story that the game tells isn't as grandiose as something from the Souls games. It's nice that I can easily understand what's going on throughout the game, and the same thing can be said for questlines. Lies of P is special in the fact that it's one of the first games in the Soul genre to truly make me care about its NPCs and the people I was interacting with, and I directly contribute this to the upfront nature of the game's writing. Not that I don't love characters like Solaire or Hornet from other games in the Souls-like genre, but to be honest, I find it significantly harder to get invested into a character and their struggles when talking to them feels like I'm trying to decipher poetry half the time. Like, I feel like if I wanted to know what this guy from Hollow Knight was doing, I'd have to go watch a YouTube video just to understand why he was even there in the first place. But hey, I mean, at least he had a cool boss fight. Anyway, Lies of P gave me its characters in a way that felt very natural. Talking to them felt more like having a conversation with someone, rather than sitting there while my 11th grade English teacher tries to dump lore down my throat. Instead, the NPCs in Lies of P really felt like characters with their own dreams and aspirations, personalities, and even mysteries to uncover. I found myself heavily invested and even emotionally invested in their storylines, which is actually kind of rare for me. I found myself near tears at the end of one character's questline, and looking back now, I'm shocked that the game was able to get that kind of reaction from me. Even now, as writing the script, I'm 100 hours into my save, getting all the character side quest achievements just so I can experience all the stories that this game has to offer. Overall, I think the writing in this game is absolutely fantastic, and I really enjoyed uncovering the story, and if at the end of the day you don't find yourself going to play the game, I'd really recommend just watching a video to get the story. Now I know that for the past 8 minutes I've been going on about how much I love this game, and this is true, but now it's time to get to the point of the video. This was the main gripe I had with this game that actually led to me walking away from it for a few weeks. And that's the combat, leveling, and weapon systems all in conjunction with each other, and the way that that works in Lies of P. See, Lies of P is very often compared to Sekiro and Bloodborne for its combat, and that's very understandable. The parry system is a lot like Sekiro, and it's a lot harsher too, but this puts an emphasis on speed in the game. And that's fine. That worked great in Sekiro. It actually makes the game feel like kind of a rhythm game, where each attack that the boss throws at you needs to be studied so that you can hit it perfectly on time. But the main issue with this is that it encourages speed and punishes slower types of gameplay, which Lies of P has several and ideally wants you to be using all of them. This, however, becomes difficult when met with the boss's aggression and speed facing you in combat. When I started the game, I chose the Technique build. There's Technique, Motivity, and Advanced. Those are the main three builds you'll go for in the game, and I had no idea that Technique was just significantly better than the other builds. I feel like if you want to do a strength build in this game, you're better off just trying to bring back your ever-fading childhood happiness, which isn't coming back. But there's a lot of factors that make the strength build just clearly weaker than the Technique build, like its damage output compared to the other builds or the return in investments after a certain level. It's all not as good as Technique, but what really kills it for me is the weapons. And I find that most of my issue in Lies of P is with the weapon. And this doesn't only apply to the strength build, there's bad weapons for every build, it just happens that a majority of these weapons scale with strength. But here's my biggest problem with the weapons. In Lies of P, when you're swinging a heavy weapon, there's a long wind-up animation before the attack, and this is normal. We've seen this in many other games, it's kind of expected at this point. Damage is the trade-off for your time, but what really kills these weapons for me is what I like to call the superhero pose. This is the animation that your character gets stuck in at the end of the attack with their weapon. The length of these animations weighs heavily on what weapon you're using, making it so that heavier weapons with higher DPS have longer animations. And to be clear, I have nothing wrong with long wind-up animations. In fact, I'm pretty sure that is the best way to balance your weapons. but I don't like how long some of these animations are after you finish swinging your weapon. Especially in a fast-paced game where after swinging my weapon, I don't have time to wait a million years for Pinocchio to hit a Fortnite emote with a giant hammer you're swinging because the eldritch horror I'm fighting is about to mollywop me into oblivion. And to me, this feels very stiff, and I felt this way about a lot of the game's weapons. In other games in the genre, like Dark Souls 3, when I'm playing my Unga Bunga caveman build with a giant stick, sure, there's a long windup for the attack, but once I hit the enemy, I'm pretty much free to move and roll around as much as I want immediately afterwards. Where in Lies of P, I have to sit around there for like 20 minutes while Pinocchio has an aneurysm trying to process what he just did. I think this is the major reason that the strength builds in Lies of P are so weak, and it overall detracts from the experience a lot. It only incentivized me to use the faster weapons when I experienced this issue myself using the technique build, and I ended up going back to the class's starter weapon instead of using the booster glaive after getting pummeled while waiting for the post-attack animation to finish. However, I know there's a lot of people who loved this weapon in their playthroughs, so maybe it's just me who feels this way. Maybe it just didn't fit into my playstyle, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not the only one who experienced this issue, so I really don't know. But at the end of the day, it's only my opinion. I'd love to hear yours in the comments, though. Going into this further, though, there's pretty much just one weapon in the game that everyone agrees is just the best weapon, and all the other weapons are, like, okay, but they're just never as good as this one, and it's like this katana thing that you get after defeating the swamp monster boss. Sorry for spoilers, but yeah, it's just way too good, and I didn't really see much of a reason to use anything else once I got my hands on it. So yeah, I mean, other than seeing that there's not much class diversity in the game, at least in my view, because I don't know why I'd want to use something that's just straight up not as good. I think it's a really great game overall, and if you just play it kind of like Sekiro, where you just use the best weapon you can get your hands on and what's most speed efficient, it's really fun, and it is a great Souls-like, and I hope that they continue to make quality games. I know they're coming out with a sequel soon, but yeah, no, once I was able to overcome this issue and just kind of use the best weapon, the game actually became a lot more tolerable. If you're not using everything the game is giving you, that's another thing I want to mention. Everything that this game gives you, you should use it to the best of your advantage, because it is so much harder if you don't. Like, enchanting your weapon, I don't know how else to say it, but like putting fire on your weapon or electricity means so much in the long run, especially on New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus, which I'm on now. It means so much and is just such a buff to you. So yeah, I really don't know how anyone would really use any other weapon and efficiently make it through the game, but once I got past that, I just started having so much more fun with the game. So, in conclusion, I really love Lies of P, and I think it's a great direction for the Souls-like genre to be going in. I hope that we can see more games like this. A lot more new studios could definitely get a foot in the door by making a pretty good Souls-like, I'd say. Though I know it's definitely not the easiest thing to do in the world. I'm not saying that. I just love the genre. It's my favorite genre of all time, and it really means so much to me, and that's at the end of the day why I'm really making this video. So I'm excited for that sequel of Lies of P. If you haven't picked up the game yourself, heavily recommend it. And despite all its flaws and everything I've criticized in this video, there is still so much more to love about this game than there is to hate, and that's how I went from hating to loving Lies of P.